So today we're going to talk about something that's both incredibly powerful and, a lot of the time, almost invisible. I'm talking about how language can be used as a weapon, how it can be used to create fear and totally shape our politics. We're going to break down a very specific rhetorical tool that's designed to do just that, to turn fear into political action. All right, let's get right into it.
It really all boils down to one big question, right? How can words, just words, create a feeling of danger that's so real it can actually change the way a whole country thinks? Well, I'll tell you, it's not magic. It's a very specific and actually very well-documented technique.
And this technique actually has a name. Researchers call it the crime frame. So in this explainer, that's what we're going to do. We're going to deconstruct it piece by piece so you can see exactly how it works.
Okay, so what exactly is the crime frame? Well, think of it as a rhetorical tool that's used to forge this really powerful link in our minds, a link between a specific group of people and the idea of crime itself. It pretty much works in two main ways. First, by making these huge generalizations, and second, by taking a really complex social issue and boiling it down to a simple, dramatic story of good versus evil.
And let's be clear, the goal here is super specific. It's to make you feel threatened. Because think about it, once that fear is there, once it's really taken root, actions that might have seemed totally extreme before are suddenly reframed as, necessary or defensive measures. And just like that, you can shift the entire window of what's considered politically acceptable.
Now, what's really interesting here is that this isn't just a random thing. Nope, it's a methodical four-step process. So let's break down exactly how it works step by step.
Okay, so first, it kicks off with generalization. This is where you take a single crime committed by one person and you act like it's a characteristic of their entire group. Step 2 is moralization. The whole issue gets simplified into a black and white battle of us against them. From there, we get the protection frame. This is where politicians are presented as the only ones who can defend us from this new threat. And all of this, it leads to the final and most dangerous step, dehumanization. This is where language is used to literally strip a group of people of their humanity.
And this is where you can really see the consequence, right? I mean, decades of social science research confirm this. The second you succeed in framing a group as less than human, that psychological barrier we all have, the one that stops us from accepting harsh or even cruel measures, it just starts to crumble. Researchers actually have a name for this. They call it creating moral distance.
Look, this isn't just some abstract theory from a textbook. The source material for this whole analysis provides documented real-world examples of this mechanism in action. So let's take a look at how it can build over time.
So what this timeline shows is how this kind of rhetoric isn't just a one-off thing. It can be a recurring theme. You see it start back in 2015 with that initial link between a group and criminality. Then you see it get defended, reinforced, and then years later, it escalates to that final step of the frame we were just talking about.
Okay, here's that direct quote from 2015 that created the initial connection. This is a textbook example of step 1, generalization. You have a huge, broad group of people being directly associated with specific violent crimes. And now let's jump forward to 2024. Here, you see step 4, dehumanization. The language is explicit. It openly questions if these people are even, well, people, using words like animals. This is basically the final destination for the crime frame.
Now hold on, because the source material is super clear on this next point, and it's really, really important for us to understand. What we are doing here is analyzing a rhetorical technique, a playbook, if you will. We are explicitly not making a direct comparison between different individuals or historical events or political regimes. What's actually put this side by side, so there's absolutely no confusion. On one hand, our focus is on the shared logic of the propaganda. How a narrative of danger is constructed to make certain policies seem justified. What we are not doing, on the other hand, is making what the source itself calls a clumsy comparison of different historical moments. The focus is on the mechanism, the tool itself, not the specific time or place it's being used. And all of this leads to a really critical question, one you should ask yourself. When you take a complicated social issue, and you just strip away all the nuance, and you turn it into a simple story of us versus a dangerous them, who actually benefits from that?
So look, understanding the mechanism is the first step, and that's huge. But the second step is knowing how to push back, how to counter it. And the good news is there are actual science-based, practical strategies for dismantling this kind of rhetoric. So here's a basic toolkit. First up is data literacy. Basically, learning to tell the difference between a single story and what the actual statistics say.
Then there's rehumanization. You fight back against stereotypes by highlighting individual stories. Another one is just naming the frame. Seriously, just calling it out, hey, that's a crime frame, can take away some of its power. It's also vital to anchor the conversation in the rule of law. And finally, there's this really powerful tool called counterspeech.
And that's that rule of law anchor we just mentioned. I mean, it's a fundamental principle of any democratic society. Guilt is individual. You are responsible for what you do, period. The approach that the crime frame pushes is the exact opposite. It's an anti-democratic idea of collective liability, where a whole group gets blamed for the actions of one or a few.
And that brings us to counterspeech. Now, this is important. This is not about fighting fire with fire. It's not about sinking to the same level. It's a targeted strategy to undermine harmful speech with facts, with empathy, and with direct contradiction. The whole point is to dismantle the logic of the harmful narrative, not just to scream back.
And so, at the end of all this, we're left with one last, really crucial question. When this crime frame is used, and it's used successfully, what political actions, what policies that were once completely unthinkable suddenly start to sound reasonable? That, right there, is the power of a narrative, and it's definitely something we're thinking about long after this is over.